I think the thing that we've always said about Russ, and I'd like to get your take on this, it feels like, and you said it, the ingenuine, whatever the word is, how is that? What is
disingenuous?
Yes, there it is. There it is. That's a good.
Yeah.
The disingenuous, it feels like he is doing what he thinks a movie character would do. Like the high knees on a plane. Like if you're writing a movie about the super good guy quarterback in the NFL, like that is something that you would do. To have shoulder pads in Monaco on a soccer field while you're throwing to like somebody that's obviously never touched a football before, like that's out of a movie, it feels like. The 5 body coaches that you're posting with the mask on, like that's out of a movie. The let's ride thing out of a movie. It's like he's almost like too perfect, and I think he's trying to be. And it's like, just be a fucking human, I think is all how we all, wearing your own jersey to training camp. Like that's out of a movie. Like that's not real life, you know? And it's interesting. It's a very interesting saga.
It really is. And, you know, I always say this about coaches that get hired for the first time, like X's and O's and all that stuff, you know, I mean, all that stuff is important. But the bottom line is, if you're inauthentic, if you're not authentic in who you are, then you're never going to have success. And I always talk about the Belichick tree. You know, when you come in and you have coached under Belichick all those years, and he's earned that respect, and he's got a couple of players like Tom Brady all those years, where if you can, you know, cuss out Tom Brady, then everybody is fair game on the roster, and Tom Brady loves to be coached hard and all that kind of stuff. Like you've got that street cred, if you will. You know, you built that up, and all of a sudden you leave. And you go and you get the opportunity, Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, you know, Josh McDaniels, you get that opportunity to be a head coach. And all of a sudden you try to become mini Belichick, right? And you become Belichickian. Like I did a game against Detroit years ago, and Matthew Stafford's hurt at the time. They've got Blau as the backup quarterback, and you know he's smart and he knows what to do, but I would say that he does not have the requisite arm strength to be a real NFL starter. And it's like November or December, and it's raining and it's cold and it's nasty, and you're playing in a dome. You're going to play in a dome Sunday, right? And yet here we are the first week of December. We're going outside on a Friday to prove how tough we are.
Toughness,
dude, that doesn't prove anything. Like we can't complete a pass because it's blowing sideways. The rain's going. Like how does that help you as a football team? Like when everything you do on Friday, that doesn't do anything for your confidence. Everything you do on Friday is just an absolute shit show. Yeah. And like now let's go, right? I mean, it's stupidity, and you lose credibility with players because they look at you like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
With that in mind, Sean Payton coming in, how much do you think he has? What will his impact be on their overall record if that is a Super Bowl roster? Like, do you think he's good enough to get them to 11 wins this year? And obviously, how well Russ plays is a massive part of that. But how big of an impact do you think Sean Payton's going to have on this team?
I think he'll have an incredible impact on the team. Now, I don't know about 11 wins, but I think you're looking at 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. 11 just seems a little bit far-fetched. And, oftentimes, I hear people talk about, hey, on paper, this roster is really good. And I say this all the time. If the games were played on paper, I'd have spent a lot less time on an operating table. They're not. You got to have great football players. A lot of times people look at athletes. Football is easy for football players. It's hard for athletes. And you got to have athletic guys that are great football players. And so sometimes you can get enamored with athleticism, and that doesn't necessarily translate to great football players. But here's the thing about Sean. So even last year, I'm doing a game in New Orleans, and a guy that's been around the NFL for 30, everybody knows him, but he works for New Orleans. And he walks up to me. I'm standing, kind of taking mental notes on what they are in red zone and what they're doing. I'm watching practice. It's on a Friday. And he walks up to me and says, you know what our problem is? And I'm like, no, what's the problem? He goes, Sean Payton walked out of the building and the fear walked out with him. And I was like, wow, that's a poignant statement, because to me, there's two types of fear. There's the biblical fear, which is like when you hear the fear of the Lord. That's not like, oh, gosh, the Lord's going to strike me down. That is awesome reverence or respect. you better have a reverence and respect for the coach that's coaching you. The other one is just straight up fear. If I don't do my job, he's going to cut my ass, and he won't even think twice about it. And I was with Joe Gibbs, who's one of the most regal people I've ever been around in my entire life, and Mike Shanahan, who's a phenomenal coach and a really good friend. And both of those guys, you knew what the standard was. And if you didn't meet the standard, you knew there would be consequences. And, Mike Shanahan would fire you. Like, he'd be like, hey, man, you're not playing well enough. You're fired. But I'm going to have pizza at the house tonight if you want to come by and get a slice. Like, it's not personal. This is just the way it is. And, like, one of the things that just resonated with me this offseason is Sean Payton comes in within, like, 2 weeks. He's in the building, and he's like, non-personnel, like non-essential personnel, non-football people, like business people, you're not allowed down in the cafeteria. Like, get the hell out. Like, what are you doing? This is a sanctuary. And we got business people in there. We got, hey, we're bringing our clients down to see which players filter through.
Oh, yeah. Take some photos.
Right. Absolutely. And Sean Payton's like, are you kidding me? Like, there's a reason that you guys are losing. And this is one of the reasons. You can't have that. You got to be able to come in there in your underpants and grab something to eat and not even think twice about it. You got to be able to, be having a conversation, like a legitimate football conversation, and not think about changing your locker room vernacular because, you got a bunch of business people and kids in there wanting to take pictures. It's mind-boggling to me that can go on within an organization. And he walks in, and within 2 weeks of being there, he's like, this ain't happening. This ain't happening on my watch. And there's a lot of little things that become big things over time. And I think as far as Russell is concerned, like Sean, one of the things I talked to Sean about a lot, and I've met with him on many occasions, but, we had a phone call about game planning. And I was like, hey, man, I just want to pick your brain. And I want you to help me out. Like, if you were doing games and how do you game plan? And one of the first things he told me was, coaches will they all want to attack a weakness. The offensive coach looks at a matchup, looks at weakness, looks at a corner they can attack or whatever, exploit, and say, man, we really want to go after this, right? And Sean says that's human nature, and young coaches will attack that regardless. He goes, my first option, or my number one priority is to mitigate potential disaster. So I may see something I really like and I want to attack, but I know it puts my right tackle in a bind, and it's gonna create a potential of a strip sack fumble and sack of the. He's like, I'll take it out. My first priority is to mitigate potential disaster. Like, put a guy in a position to lose, and then don't be surprised when he loses because you're the dumbass that put him there. Like, you put him in an untenable position, and then you wonder why he lost. Like, oh, I can't believe he didn't get that. Well, because he's not able to do what you just asked him to do. And so Russell will not be asked to do things he's not good at. They will find the group of plays and the things that he does exceptionally well. The play pass stuff that has a 7-man protection and a deep 7-step drop. So you're sitting at 11 and a half yards so you can see over the line of scrimmage, and you're running like a over with a post behind it, right? And if the safety jumps the over, you throw the post. And if the safety hangs on the post, you throw the over. And it's one of those things where you don't get your vision clouded. You can see it because you're 11 and a half yards deep. Like, we'll do that off our running game. We'll put him in a position to do the things he does well, as opposed to last year doing a bunch of things that you can't do.
Yeah.
And that's what Sean will do for Russell. And that's why Russell will have a bounce back season.
That's an interesting thing to hear from a play caller, the mitigating disaster, because normally, and I've heard from players that play, a lot more important positions than the one that I played, they'll be like, well, yeah, and then they say execution is the reason why. Like, well, if we could have executed the play, it would have worked. And then all week, though, there's a thought from a lot of players like, we can't. Like, this is not an executable play, really, especially if we see this front. So coaches try to put that off. I didn't know Sean Payton was like that. Feels like he's incredibly humble there. That's like kind of setting your pride aside and being like, what do you do? What do you like to do? What do we like to do? While also being a hard ass, right? And you said the fear and everything that goes out in the building.
Right.
He was asked about Russell Wilson having his own office and his own body guru, and he said, I'm not familiar with anything. Like, no way. That would not be happening. You know what I mean? But he's won before. So just like the Bill Belichick statement, just like how Josh McDaniels and Patricia and Mangini tried to be Bill Belichick, it's like Sean Payton already has the resume. Like if we do what this guy says, we'll win. Isn't that what we're trying to do? I love it. I love the Sean Payton back in the building stuff. We need more guys like that, I think, Stink.